Every story has a turning point, a moment when everything changes. The turning point.
I used to think I had it all, a great job at a mid-sized tech firm, a beautiful home, and a husband, Daniel, who always knew how to make me laugh, even after the hardest days. Our life wasn't flashy, but it was stable, safe, like a warm, familiar song on repeat. Every weekday morning was the same. I'd wake up at 6:30, pour myself a cup of coffee, and sit on the porch just long enough to hear the neighborhood dogs start barking. Daniel would come down 10 minutes later, kiss my cheek, and ask about my schedule like he always did. We were a team. That's how I saw us. I worked in operations, handling internal systems, scheduling, performance data. I wasn't the type of person to take big risks. I wasn't looking to climb the ladder fast or play dirty. I just wanted to do my job well and go home. That's it. Then one Monday morning, everything changed. I'd barely walked into the office when my manager pulled me into a conference room. There were two men inside, both wearing dark suits and unreadable expressions. "Emma Green?" one of them asked. I nodded. "I'm Agent Wilcox. This is Agent Moreno. We're with Financial Crimes Division." I laughed at first. I genuinely thought it was some kind of joke. But then he pulled out a folder, thick, heavy, and labeled with my name. Inside were screenshots of bank transfers, access logs, and timestamps, all tied to me. I just sat there, number confused. "We have reason to believe you initiated an unauthorized transfer of company funds totaling $240,000, Agent Wilcox continued. I remember blinking at him, waiting for the punchline. But it never came. I was under investigation. They said the transfers were made using my employee login, that the files were accessed from my company laptop, that the trail led directly to me. And worst of all, they said it wasn't a one-time thing. They had logs going back 3 months. I didn't understand. I couldn't even explain how any of it could be true. I didn't even know how to access half the software mentioned in their report. They let me go home that day, but not before confiscating my laptop and phone. I was officially suspended. I barely made it back to the house before collapsing into tears. Daniel held me, said it had to be a mistake, that we'd figure it out together. I believed him. He said all the right things. "I'm with you no matter what. We'll get a lawyer. You've done nothing wrong." But there was something off, something in his voice, a hesitation I couldn't quite place. I told myself I was imagining it, that the stress was making me paranoid. Looking back now, I realized that moment, right there in our living room, was when I should have known that this wasn't just some horrible misunderstanding. This was a setup, and the person I trusted most in the world was about to put the knife in my back. The next morning, I barely slept. Every creak in the hallway, every buzz from my phone jolted me awake. I kept checking my email, half hoping for a message from HR saying it was all a mistake, that they'd found the real culprit, that I could come back to work, but the inbox stayed empty. By noon, Daniel insisted I eat something. He made toast, eggs. I barely touched them. My stomach felt like it had been wrung out like a towel. "I reached out to a lawyer," he said, sitting across from me, someone a friend recommended. I looked up. "Already?" He hesitated. "We need to be proactive, Em. You were suspended. That's serious. You need someone to speak for you before this gets worse." That word, suspended, landed hard, like it had weight now. He slid a business card across the table. Clean design, white text on navy, Lindsay Harris, defense attorney. "I'll call," I said softly, though I still didn't believe this was real. Then came the knock at the door, 2 firm measured hits. Daniel and I froze. We looked at each other like kids caught sneaking out past curfew. Slowly, I stood up and opened the door. It was Agent Wilcox, again, but this time he wasn't smiling. "Emma Green," he said, "I'm placing you under arrest for felony embezzlement and computer fraud." I think I stopped breathing. Daniel's voice cracked behind me. "There's got to be a mistake." But the cuffs were already around my wrists. The ride to the station felt like a dream, or a nightmare. Everything blurred outside the window. People walking dogs, kids riding bikes. The world kept moving, like nothing had happened, like my life wasn't falling apart. At booking, they read me the charges: 2 counts of financial fraud, 1 count of conspiracy. My bail was set at $50,000. Daniel bailed me out by evening. The ride home was silent. I kept expecting him to say something, anything, but he just stared at the road, jaw clenched, eyes distant. When we got home, I finally broke. "I didn't do this, Daniel. You know that, right?" He paused, standing in the kitchen doorway. "Yeah, of course." But his tone was flat, measured. I stepped closer. "You believe me, don't you?" He nodded, but it was too slow, too deliberate. Then he added, "Emma, I don't know what to believe right now." That sentence, that one damn sentence, it shattered something in me. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to beg him to look me in the eye and say he knew I was innocent. But instead, I walked past him, straight to the bathroom, and locked the door. I slid down the wall and cried harder than I ever had in my life, because it wasn't the charges that hurt the most. It was the way Daniel looked at me, like I was a stranger. The days that followed felt like a blur, like I was moving underwater while the rest of the world sped by. The lawyer Daniel found, Lindsay Harris, turned out to be sharp, confident, and surprisingly direct. She didn't sugarcoat anything. "You're in deep," she said during our first meeting. "The digital trail looks bad, very bad, but trails can be forged." Her tone gave me a sliver of hope, even if her eyes didn't. I spent hours going over every document, every screenshot, every supposed transfer I'd made, but it was like looking at someone else's actions wearing my face. And all the while, Daniel grew quieter. At first, I thought it was just stress. We barely spoke unless it was about the case. He'd go to bed early. He started leaving his phone face down on the table, screen locked. He said work was demanding, that he needed space to think. And I gave it to him. Maybe that was my mistake, assuming distance meant pressure, not secrets. One night, as I was sorting through old emails, I found something strange. A notification from months ago that my login had been used on a Saturday. I never worked weekends. When I asked Daniel if he remembered anything unusual that day, he paused, then shook his head slowly. Nothing I can think of. But something flickered across his face, a half-second crack in his expression, and it was gone. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning in loops. Why would Daniel lie? Why wouldn't he want to help me figure this out? Unless he already knew more than he let on. The next morning, I checked our shared bank account. Daniel had transferred $5,000 to a name I didn't recognize. When I asked him, he said it was for legal prep, someone Lindsay referred him to for research. I wanted to believe him, but my stomach twisted the way it does when you know you're being lied to and just don't want to face it. At Lindsay's suggestion, I requested a copy of the company's internal access logs through Discovery. A few days later, I got it. A spreadsheet, lines of data, color-coded columns. One entry stood out. My login was used remotely during a company holiday, accessed through a home IP address. While I was out of state visiting my sister, I remembered that weekend vividly. We went hiking, no signal, no Wi-Fi. I stared at the screen for a long time, cold creeping into my chest. Someone had used my computer from our house while I was gone, and there were only 2 people with access to our Wi-Fi, me and Daniel. I didn't say anything to him that night. I couldn't. I just watched him pour himself a drink, sit on the couch, and scroll through his phone like nothing was wrong. But now, for the first time, I wasn't just scared of the charges. I was scared of the man sitting 10 feet away from me. The summons came on a Wednesday morning, email from Lindsay, subject line in all caps, preliminary hearing scheduled. I opened it with shaking hands. The date was set for Monday. 5 days to prepare for the beginning of something that already felt like the end. I spent the weekend in a kind of suspended reality, flipping between stacks of legal documents and trying to pretend my life wasn't caving in. Lindsay coached me over Zoom, what to say, how to sit, where to look. "You're not guilty," she reminded me, "but don't act angry. Don't act like a victim. Be clear, be calm, be precise." Daniel said almost nothing. He didn't ask about the hearing. He didn't offer to come. When I brought it up, he mumbled something about work deadlines. "I'll try," he said. "No promises." Monday came too fast. The courthouse felt colder than I expected. Gray walls, gray floors, gray people in suits moving like clockwork. Lindsay met me at the entrance and walked me through security. Her voice was low and even. "This is just step 1. They'll present their side. We'll challenge it. Don't let their tone shake you." But the prosecution's tone didn't just shake me. It cracked the floor under my feet. Their argument was precise and brutal. They laid out a narrative where I, a mid-level operations manager, had manipulated internal systems to funnel money into an untraceable shell account. They showed timestamps, IP data, transaction logs. Every technical fingerprint pointed to me. Then they brought out the laptop, my work device, the one they said held evidence of installed data manipulation software. I didn't even know what half of it was. Lindsay objected to the conclusion. "Correlation isn't intent," she argued. "Anyone with access could have planted it." But the judge didn't look convinced. I kept waiting for someone to say what I knew, that it wasn't me, that something didn't add up, that they'd made a mistake. And then the prosecution said, "We'd like to call a witness who can attest to the defendant's knowledge of company systems and behavior during the period in question." I froze. They called Daniel Green to the stand. He walked past me without making eye contact, sat straight, adjusted his tie. Lindsay leaned toward me. "Did you know he was testifying?" I shook my head, throat dry. Under oath, Daniel answered their questions with calm, rehearsed clarity. He spoke about my growing frustration at work, how I often complained that others were being promoted over me. He said I'd mentioned being undervalued and joked about how easy it would be to move numbers around. They asked if he thought I was capable of stealing from the company. He hesitated, just for a second, and then he said, "Yes, I think she is." The words hit harder than the cuffs ever did. It wasn't just betrayal, it was annihilation. I didn't hear the rest. My ears were ringing, my vision tunneling. Lindsay squeezed my hand under the table, grounding me, but my thoughts were spinning. Why would he say that? Why would he do this? Unless he wasn't just trying to protect himself, he was making sure I took the fall. After Daniel's testimony, I stopped sleeping. Even with the sedatives Lindsay recommended, my brain wouldn't rest. It replayed his words on a loop. "Yes, I think she is." 5 words, 5 nails in the coffin of our marriage, and maybe my future. I tried to tell myself he was pressured, nervous, confused, that he didn't mean it. But every time I looked at the cold confidence in his eyes on that witness stand, I knew the truth. He meant every word. Lindsay was furious. "He blindsided us," she said. "You're his wife. He never should have been allowed on that stand without our knowledge. The prosecution's playing dirty." But I was done being shocked. I wanted answers. So I called the only person I knew who might help me dig deeper, Zach Taylor, a quiet, awkward systems analyst from my old team. We'd worked together for years. He was meticulous, obsessive about access logs and system protocols. If anyone could find something the investigators missed, it was him. We met at a tiny coffee shop, 30 minutes outside the city. I wore sunglasses and kept my head low. He showed up 5 minutes late, laptop already open, nervous energy radiating from every movement. "I pulled some old backups from before IT wiped your machine," he said quietly. They didn't know they still had a mirror image from March. "It's weird, Emma. Some of the access logs were overwritten manually, sloppy, but the timing's off." "How off?" "There's a set of logins using your credentials that happen while your system clock was wrong, by exactly 11 minutes. That's almost impossible unless someone cloned your environment and resynced it manually." I blinked. Meaning? Meaning, someone impersonated your account, but didn't match the internal clock settings perfectly. It leaves a fingerprint. He turned his laptop around. On the screen were 2 side-by-side log entries. One had a perfectly aligned timestamp, the other 11 minutes off, but the IP address was the same, our home. Zach looked at me, face pale. "Emma, whoever did this was inside your house." I couldn't breathe. I knew I hadn't touched my laptop during that window. I was in the hospital with my sister. She had a minor surgery, and I stayed overnight. There were photos, texts, receipts. I had an alibi, but my account had been active. From home, there was only one explanation: Daniel. And if Zach was right, he hadn't just framed me. He'd done it using my computer, my identity, our home, and made sure the evidence pointed to me with surgical precision. That night, I sat in the guest room, my room now, and stared at the wedding photo on the shelf. It looked like a joke, a beautiful staged lie. My husband hadn't just lied under oath. He'd built the case against me from the inside, and now I was going to prove it. The next morning, I gave Lindsay everything Zach had found: logs, screenshots, timestamps. She flipped through them, her brows drawn tight, lips pressed together in concentration. "This is good," she said slowly. "Not bulletproof yet, but good. It gives us a crack. Now we need to wedge it open." She filed a motion for digital forensics access to the company's remote login infrastructure and requested a new timeline review from an independent expert. The judge approved it faster than we expected. Maybe he saw how fast the case was crumbling beneath the surface polish. Meanwhile, Zach kept digging. A week later, he sent me a voice note at 2:17 a.m. "Emma, I think I found something. You're going to want to sit down." He'd pulled metadata from a backup of my work laptop long after IT thought they'd wiped it clean. Buried inside the code of an archived script file, he found a username, not mine. D. Green, Daniel's work ID. He never worked for my company. He wasn't supposed to have access to anything on that system, but somehow a piece of him had left a fingerprint, accidentally embedded in the source code of the automation tool used to schedule the illegal transfers. His ID had been used to test run the script. Zach's voice was shaky in the next clip. He didn't cover his tracks well enough. He installed a scheduler tool and linked it to your credentials, but he tested it first, and that test log, it's still there, buried in a temp file, but intact. I sent it to Lindsay immediately. She called within the hour. This is the first direct connection we have between Daniel and the manipulation code. We can file a motion to bring him back in, this time not as a witness, but as a person of interest. But even as her voice surged with adrenaline, I felt something colder settle into my chest. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about facing the possibility that my husband hadn't just wanted to protect himself. He'd planned this for months, maybe longer. I started replaying every strange moment of the past year, how he encouraged me to use our home Wi-Fi for remote work, how he always helped me with software updates, how he suddenly took an interest in my company's stock performance. He hadn't just framed me. He'd studied me, mimicked my patterns, watched how I logged in, when I took breaks, what tools I used. He'd used our intimacy as a blueprint for betrayal. Later that evening, I confronted him. I didn't mean to. It just happened. We crossed paths in the kitchen, and something inside me cracked. I held up my phone with Zach's screenshots. "This is your ID, Daniel, on my machine." He stared at the screen for a beat too long, then shrugged. "That doesn't prove anything. You lied under oath." "No," he said calmly. "I testified. There's a difference." And then he walked away. Just like that. No panic, no apology, just distance. In that moment, I understood. He wasn't going to stop. He didn't think he'd lose. He thought he was smarter, more prepared, more believable. But he'd made one mistake. He underestimated me. Lindsay moved fast. With Zach's discovery and the embedded ID logs, she filed a motion for formal questioning of Daniel under suspicion of perjury, conspiracy, and fraud. The judge approved it with a rare note of urgency. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tide shift, slowly but unmistakably. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday. Daniel was served notice at his office. He didn't say a word to me that night, just came home late, poured himself a drink, and scrolled through his phone like nothing had changed. But I saw it in his eyes, the flicker of something behind the calm, not guilt, not fear, control slipping. The next morning, Lindsay called. Her voice was tight. "There's more. Emma, do you know what happens to unclaimed performance bonuses in your company?" "No," I said. "They expire after a year, I think." "They don't. They transfer to the next eligible stakeholder on the contract if the original recipient is terminated for misconduct." I froze. "Wait, what does that mean?" "It means," she continued, "that the restricted equity you earned last quarter, worth almost $400,000, would default to your legal next of kin, Daniel, if you were convicted of fraud before the end of Q3. I sat down slowly. "He'd get my bonus if I went to prison?" "Yes. And based on your prenuptial agreement, he'd keep it, even if you divorced, because it wouldn't be counted as earned marital income. It would be a default transfer of corporate asset." Suddenly, everything clicked. The silence, the distance, the carefully timed testimony, the way he waited until after I was charged to move money between accounts. This wasn't about embarrassment or self-preservation. It was about money, power, exit strategy. He'd used our marriage as a mechanism. Every shared login, every document he helped me review, every password I'd ever saved in our home network. He'd been mapping my behavior for months, maybe longer. This wasn't just betrayal. It was engineering. By Wednesday night, the media caught wind. A small finance blog published a story titled, "Operations Manager Framed in Bonus Scandal, Husband Under Review." It spread fast. Bigger outlets picked it up. My company issued a statement. No comment during ongoing investigation. Daniel didn't come home that night. On Thursday, in court, he finally cracked. It started slowly. Lindsay walked him through the metadata, the code traces, the IP logs. He denied everything. Then she showed the copy of the shell script with his user ID, and his tone shifted. "You can't even prove that was me," he snapped. "This is all circumstantial." Then Lindsay did something I didn't expect. She slid her tablet forward and played a clip. It was a security feed. Dull resolution, time-stamped, our home office. Daniel sitting at my desk, typing on my laptop, 12 days before the investigation started. His reflection caught in the screen. He didn't speak, just stared at the image. The courtroom was silent. Then he turned to the judge and said coldly, "I want a lawyer." Lindsay leaned over and whispered, "That's the sound of a story collapsing." But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow, tired, broken, because even if I cleared my name, even if the charges vanished, there was no undoing the fact that the man I loved had chosen to destroy me, methodically and without hesitation. Still, I wasn't finished, because I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly who Daniel Green really was. 2 weeks after Daniel invoked his right to counsel, I received an email from the district attorney's office. The charges against me were dropped, formally, fully, quietly. No press conference, no apology, just a signed PDF and a line that read, "In light of new evidence, we are terminating prosecution." It should have felt like freedom, like oxygen after nearly drowning, and for a few moments it did. But the truth is, when someone deliberately tries to destroy your life and nearly succeeds, freedom comes with an aftertaste. Daniel lawyered up and never returned to our house. Within a month, divorce papers arrived by courier. No note, no explanation, just signatures and a list of property he was requesting. Lindsay reviewed the document and laughed dryly. He thinks he's still holding cards. Let's show him what happens when you bluff with nothing in your hand. The court granted me exclusive ownership of our home. A judgment for legal damages and pending charges for wire fraud and perjury were filed against Daniel. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't want to see him again. I didn't want closure. I wanted distance. My company offered me a quiet severance and a strongly worded NDA. I didn't fight it. I didn't want my old job back. I didn't want anything back. Some things once broken aren't meant to be fixed. What surprised me most was the messages I started getting from co-workers, neighbors, even Daniel's college friends. I never trusted him. I always thought something was off. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. People always say that after the mask slips, never before. I moved out of the city a month later, rented a small place near the coast. No Wi-Fi the first few weeks, just silence and space and breath. I started writing again, not for anyone else, just for me. Some nights I still wake up in a panic, convinced someone's hacking into my laptop. Other times, I dream that Daniel walks back into the kitchen like nothing happened, asking if I want coffee. But then I open my eyes, and I remember I survived. Not just the charges, not just the court. I survived him. And now I know exactly what I'm capable of.
If this story moved you, there's more to come. Subscribe and don't miss the next turning point.